For the latest top tips, reviews and advice, please subscribe below.
Hello and welcome to Attwoolls Outdoors with me, Mike. Today I'm giving you a bit of a pitching video, so a short tutorial video about how you're going to pitch your Vango Sierra Air Tent, be it the 300 or the 500 as well. So what I'm going to use is basically we'll go through the method of how you're going to pitch this model. This demonstration video I'm going to use the 500, but the principle is exactly the same regardless of which size you go for. Now, what we're going to do firstly is ideally you probably put a footprint down first, just protect the tent against any sort of mud or dirt or anything like that. For the purposes of myself, I'm basically just going to pitch this and pack it down straight away again. So the grass is dry, we're clean, so I haven't got to worry about that too much. So first thing we'll do is we'll unravel the tent. Ideally, again, by having a footprint down, you kind of position where you want to have it on the pitch. Just pull that over there for a second. So we'll lay it out quite nice and easily. Now what we want to do is basically start by pegging the main four corners. So when I say main four corners, what I'm referring to is basically the back two, and then the front two where the ground sheet is kind of sewn in. So we're just going to position it a little bit like so. Use our trusty mallet. I'm going to use my own pegs just for the time being, just as I've got to pitch it. I don't want to not damage, but utilise the pegs that are provided with the actual tent itself. So we'll start with doing the main kind of four corners itself. So we'll start with the back two. You want to insert your peg about a 45-degree angle, just to kind of give it plenty of support. And that way when you pull against it, you're not pulling the peg directly up and out. And then we're going to pull directly against that peg on the other side with the same thing. Again, get a nice amount of tension into it. Peg goes in nice and simply, and then we're going to pull against that. So we've got kind of our fixed bottom edge, for example, so then we can sort of pull out and away from that point. So just getting it nice and square. Make sure we haven't got anything tangled up. Now, because it's kind of, by doing this, we're actually pegging the main part where the ground sheet is physically sewn in. And what you'll have is like little red webbing straps you can see. Now, that's kind of the first main sign of your peg points or where you want to start with. I always like to have the peg points itself fully out, so that when you peg it, naturally what will happen is it will kind of give a little bit over time, so you'll find you'll need the tension up. So if you are on the largest setting or furthest away, for example, the joys this means that you can always give a bit more extra tension to it. Now, the front section we see here, I want to peg directly in line with the outside. These you can probably just do a little bit preliminary, just to make sure it's kind of there or thereabouts. But the same kind of premise, we're creating a perfect kind of rectangular shape. Gone a bit too far on that one. So we'll go. Like I say, you only want to kind of do it loosely. We can tweak this a little bit as we go through, but it gives you a bit more of a better understanding of how it's going to kind of nicely sit in there. So once we're at this stage, what we'll do is get our inflatable pump. We'll make sure that we've got the door, side door and front doors are a little bit open to start with. The reason for this is purely for the fact that we can actually get air into the tent itself, and we need to not kind of like a little vacuum trying to fight against itself. Pressure gauge on the pump, we're only going about 7 psi per tube. Personally, I always like to start in the middle, just because I find it's a bit easier and it sort of distributes the weight of the fabric and tension on the fabric a bit easier. Doesn't matter kind of which, if the inflation or deflation point is open or closed. The joys of that actually is as you attach onto the actual valve itself, it will automatically lock off into a closed position, so you haven't got to worry about overinflating it or quickly having to put the pump kind of nozzle in, or the cap, for example, in afterwards. So full pressure, nice and neatly. What we will do is we'll do the front one now. Again, it's just going to help allow air get into the tent And then from that point there, it should pretty much kind of freestand in its own right. Mainly because we've got the main 4 pegging points in place. And the joys of this obviously is, because we've pegged it down, doesn't matter if it's a windy day or whatever may be going on, the tent's nicely secured. And then from there, we just kind of peg out the rest of it. So, as you can see, this can be done quite happily by one person on their own, making it sort of the perfect tent to go on the way for the weekend or longer spells if you really wanted to. On the pressure gauge on the pump, there is a little green zone, and literally we're just going straight into the middle of the green zone, which is 7 psi. Lovely jubbly. And you see how it just pops itself up, and that's just because obviously the bottom is fixed, giving the air some structure, and then we're good to go. By pegging the main 4 corners, you've obviously just kind of approximately done. Once we've kind of got it fully inflated, we can sort of tweak that a little bit. Just get a little bit more tension on the tent. Or if we kind of pegged it squarely enough, it means hopefully we can just adjust our original pegging points in a little bit more. So just getting a little bit more extra tension. Perfect. Job's a good one. So what we'll do now is we've got one single pole to inflate on the front section. So we'll insert that to start with. Now, what I like to do is just kind of open it all up, insert each pole section into one another and feed it through. The key thing is to always keep the tension going directly forward into the tent. So you've got a pole sleeve just on the front located there. So the key thing is to always keep that pole going forward as you kind of get the next section more often not the elastic strong enough that it kind of forms the pole in its own right anyway. Ideally what we're looking for is the pole to be equal on either side. So what we can do now is we've just basically pop that into the ring and pin at the bottom. So we've done on one side. Because it's dug in the ground, it almost kind of emulates how it would look in general. That's popped directly in the ground. And we should basically just take one peg and just peg the front canopy, really just to kind of bring it out, because then it means that we haven't got to worry about anything else. So just do one peg, just kind of keeps it pulled out nice and neatly. Now, crucially, what we'll do is we'll shut the front door up, just to make sure as we kind of carry on our pegging, we don't oversplay that front section. And from here, what we can happily do now is just clip onto the pole itself, just make sure this side fabric is pulled nice and tightly towards it. So we'll do the same on that both sides. So nice and neat. Perfect. So the tent's sitting quite nice. I don't think I have to really tweak it too much in that sense. We might just kind of get a little bit extra tension on from the back section. Just pull that a little bit more. You can always tell by if the fabric's sort of drooping or sitting down as such. But I think on the whole, we're pretty good to go. So now what we'll do is we'll basically peg out the rest of the guy ropes. Now, I'd always recommend kind of taking the guy ropes as long as you possibly can. The reason being is that actually it just means that you can always tension it in if need be. Like I said, they will kind of give a little bit over time in terms of the guy ropes itself. So it's always a benefit just to have a bit more adjustability on it. Now, ideally you want to kind of go in line with where they are. So the front ones, as you can see here, go directly forward, whereas ones at the side often they want to follow the seam or come directly out from the air beam. What you will notice is actually there are almost like a little flap. Now, I'm not trying to pull these too much. The reason for that is that I don't want to distort the actual shape of the awning, the tent itself. It's more just kind of hold it in place and stop it from being pushed backwards. So you want a little bit of tension on it, but not necessarily too much. And again, like I said, we just want to come directly out, put the guy out sort of fully as long as it will go. Again, when we're inserting the pegs, we still want to carry on in that sort of 45-degree angle. I mean, it depends on your pitch size to whether how long the guy ropes can be, but like I said, we're not going to go too much, just a little bit to give a bit of extra tension, just like that. And as we go around, we can kind of just peg the bottom as well as the top. So again, we're not trying to go too much with the pegging points, just enough to get a little bit more tension on there. But joys of something like this, is once it's up, it sits really well. And I think this new kind of colour with the sort of special, the mixed blends of the denier of the fabric, I think works really quite smartly. Well, at the back here, we've got a really nice big ventilation point as well. So if we really want to put the vent out, we can certainly do that. Again, we want to make sure that all of these little corner points here are nice and taut and not being kind of oversplayed. But when you've got a glorious day like today, can't think of anything kind of better to do than be camping, that's for sure. At this point here is woman's worth as well, because once the tent's physically up, the guying is just the extra bit. So if you have got someone else who wants to start making the bedding and stuff on the inside, of course you can maximise that quite nice and neatly. But that, in a nutshell, is the tent up. So again, doesn't take a huge amount of time, quite swift, quite compact, very easy to pitch as a whole. And of course, what we will look on doing is onto our next sort of packing video of the Sierra. If you want more information, sort of more product detailed stuff about the actual tent itself, what I'd recommend doing is checking out our review video we've done on the model. It'll tell you all the details through the fabric, individual features, inside look about, and give you a bit more of a whole look and opinion really on this new model from Vango. So if any more questions or queries, by all means comment in the box below. But hopefully we'll see you again soon in our next Attwoolls video review. Failing that, let's move on to packing it away. So now we move on to packing away the Sierra, and what we're doing was the same sort of things we just did a moment ago, but purely in reverse. So what we'll start with actually is kind of opening that front door, basically to allow any sort of internal air to escape. What I always recommend with any kind of internal doors that matter is you kind of almost have them sort of a third open, just allow the air to come out. Now, the crucial thing, depending on which way the wind's blowing, it either can really help or hinder you. Luckily for today, we've got the wind blowing from the back, so we're not too worried about that. But what we can do is leave the main four corners of the actual tent fully pegged in, and we can just unpeg the guy ropes and the bottom points here. By leaving the main four corners directly pegged in, it just makes life a lot easier. It means the tent will still happily fully stand up on its own, and what we'll then do is sort of deflate the beams from the back towards the front. The reason we kind of do this is mainly so any sort of internal air can be pushed forward and out the front door, which obviously I've just opened a second ago, making you sort of, it's a bit more help than a hindrance. Like I said, we're a bit fortunate today that the wind's blowing from behind, so it makes life a little bit easier for us. But even so, what we can always do is rotate the tent if need be. Now, I've undone all the guy ropes. You could in theory leave that front guy rope if you really, really wanted to. We'll just unclip that pole to start with, and then we're going to feed out the sleeve. We've left the main kind of inflatable tent quite nice and neatly in there. Crucially, I want to say when you've got poles, is always feed out from one end. Never pull the pole directly out. Reason if you do that, what tends to happen is the segments come off section by section. So what we can do here is, like I said, just feed the pole slowly out the sleeve. The joys of this being kind of a hybrid, there's only one pole to worry about, and the other benefit as well, it gives you your kind of your main kind of widths on when you want to pack it away. That pole itself is a great indicator of how wide you want your folds to be. So we will certainly utilise that later on when we get down to it fully deflated. As previously mentioned, it's the same process that you'd use for this if you had the 300 model versus the 500 model that we're utilising for this video. What I want to do now is I'm going to put those poles directly at the back, just because that's my kind of sizing guide. Now we've got the sort of tent pretty much ready to go. We can deflate it now. Like I said, the reason we do it from back towards the front is so that all internal air thrusts forward directly at the tent itself. I like to give a little bit of a gap between each fold, each deflate, really sort of let the air come out. You want to make sure with the Vango valve that actually you push the valve directly in and rotate it 90 degrees. Otherwise what you find is that the valve actually just shuts. So that's where it's quite crucial to make sure you, by pushing it in and turning it, that valve stays fully open the whole time. We can remove our kind of front pegs. Oh, they're in there hard, aren't they? There we go. And before we do anything, we would obviously remove said frisbee from the living area. Now, I personally like to fold the front door fully back. Again, it means that you can see directly where the ground sheet is, and you know what you're working with. If you want to be really pedantic, which I quite like to be, you can, of course, just bring the roof section over to one side and fold it directly back on itself. Just kind of keeps a nice fold, and you can see there is still some internal air for inside. If you've got a wind coming from a certain direction, for example from the back here, I'm going to leave this peg directly in, so that means it's not going to flop over. But I'll remove basically the pegs on this side. The reason we're doing this side first is purely because all the valves are located on that side. So what we want to do with not only the internal air in the tent itself, but also within the actual tubes, is fold it in kind of a bag shape width, or for the matter, the pole shape width from this side over to that side. What this does, like I said, is it's pushing those internal air within the tent all over to one side, but more importantly towards the valves itself. Now, this process you can do a couple of times if you really want to. I kind of push down really on every section. Again, you can get your kids to do teddy bear rolls, or dogs for that matter. But with doing this, again, you're pushing the air, more importantly where the tubes are based, out. You know, there is the option you can use the pump in reverse. Personally, to do so, you've got to make sure that the pressure gauge is fully off. I've never done it myself. I've never had an issue with packing away a tent back into its bag. Providing you do this method, again, I'll just give a bit of extra pressure where that tube's located, then generally you're perfectly fine. It's all just managing about the airflow within the tent itself. And again, just run your hands directly where the beams are. Is there a bad thing to go, I'll say, a bit shorter than you think you need? But by using the poles as a guide, it's a perfect kind of representation of it. One thing, if you want to be, you know, help yourself next time around as well, what you can always do as well is just kind of extend any pegging points. The reason you might do this is just because when you can peg it next time, also they're fully extended, ready for next time use. Remove those two pegs. I'm doing it in a nice awkward way. There we go. I'm going to chuck the bag directly at the bottom, like so I'll use my own pegs. Let's fold that last little bit in, just so we've got a nice bit where we're just going ground sheet to ground sheet. This where I sort of mentioned if you have a footprint, because the way you kind of pack this up, that's where a footprint really does help. Now, if you've got sort of ties, I'd always recommend putting them underneath to start with. Failing that, what you can do is just put the bag just directly at the end, so when you come to do that final roll, you're already on top and slash into the bag itself. The poles are great because they give you a really nice handle, something to really grasp around and get your sort of tight roll onto to start with. Key thing is getting as tight as possible at the start, otherwise it tends to get bigger and bigger as you go along. I personally like to put my weight kind of almost fully on top of it and just kind of push and roll. This part is that you can do a couple of times if you really wanted to. You always find a little bit of a bulge when you get to an air beam itself. It's just where there's kind of excess fabric of the air tube itself. And we're rolling away. Like I said, how we're pushing all that air out towards that front door, that's kind of why we do it to the back. So even with the roll, for example, It all works really nicely. And of course, because we're directly on top of the bag already, goes in the bag like a dream. Got some webbing straps as well. So again, you can put everything else you need to quite happily in the bag, but very quick, very simple. Again, perfect for weekends away or longer spells you really want to, but apart from that, we're up and good, ready to go. For more information on the actual tent as well, what you can do is have a look at our YouTube video we've done a review video talking about all of the different features as per mentioned. But if you have any more questions, queries or concerns, feel free to comment in the box below. It's always good to have feedback from you guys, be it good, bad or ugly. But in essence, that's kind of how you're going to pitch and also pack away your Vango Sierra tent, be it the Air 300 or also the 500 as well. Hopefully we'll see you again soon in our next Attwoolls Outdoors video review.